In 1943, 7 shipyards stretching from California to Washington employed over 200,000 workers operating around the clock in 3 shifts. They built ships faster than the enemy could sink them, one every single day. One crew assembled an entire 10,500-ton cargo ship in 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. At their peak, the Richmond Shipyards alone turned out as many as 3 vessels in a single day. $1.8 billion worth of ships before the war's end. Waiting lists for jobs stretched for months. Entire cities rose from empty fields to house the workers flooding in from across America. Then the war ended. Within weeks, the shipyards fell silent. The cranes stopped moving. The welding torches went dark. By late 1945, nearly 200,000 workers had vanished from payrolls that once seemed permanent. The worker housing, including Oregon's second-largest city, sat abandoned, then destroyed. And the man who built this empire watched helplessly as the machine he created was dismantled faster than he'd built it. This is the story of Henry J. Kaiser, the son of a German immigrant shoemaker who dropped out of school at 13, arrived in the West with nothing, and constructed an industrial colossus that helped win World War II. How innovation, ambition, and revolutionary thinking built the greatest shipbuilding operation in American history. And how that same operation, purpose-built for war, was erased almost overnight when the cannons stopped firing. This isn't just about rusting shipyards and forgotten workers. This is about the brutal truth of wartime industry, the human cost of building for destruction, and what happens when an empire is designed to disappear. Welcome inside the silent Kaiser Shipyards, where America's war machine was built, triumphant and abandoned. Sprout Brook, New York, 1895. A 13-year-old boy walks 4 miles through mud and frost to reach Utica. His shoes are worn thin. His father, a German immigrant shoemaker, can barely keep the family fed. His mother is sick. The country is still crawling out of the panic of 1893, and jobs are scarce. It takes Henry Kaiser 3 weeks to find work. He lands a position as a stockroom delivery boy at a dry goods store. The pay is $1.50 per week. He walks to and from work every single day because he cannot afford the trolley fare. 8 miles of walking, 6 days a week, for $1.50. He's not complaining. He's calculating. Henry John Kaiser was born May 9th, 1882, in this tiny hamlet 60 miles west of Albany. His father Franz had emigrated from Steinheim, Germany, a decade earlier. His mother Anna Marie worked in a cheese factory, then as a part-time nurse. They weren't destitute, but they were 1 bad month away from disaster. Franz Kaiser was a cobbler who never prospered. Some accounts call him an alcoholic. What's certain is that he couldn't provide enough. So Henry provides instead. While other boys his age are finishing school, Henry is learning the dry goods business from the stockroom floor. He gets promoted to sales clerk, then traveling salesman. He takes a correspondence course in salesmanship and masters it quickly. But after 3 years, he's restless. Selling fabric and buttons isn't going to build anything. Then his mother dies. It's 1899. Anna Marie Kaiser is 52 years old. Legend says she dies in Henry's arms. He's 17, and he will later blame her death partly on inadequate health care. This memory will haunt him for decades. It will eventually drive him to create something revolutionary. But that's 40 years away. For now, Henry has another obsession: photography. He'd gotten his first Kodak camera at 12, right when Eastman Kodak in nearby Rochester was transforming the industry. By 17, he's selling photography supplies across New York State. By 20, he owns and operates his own studio in Lake Placid. Then Bess Fosberg walks through his door to buy film. She's 19, the daughter of a wealthy Virginia lumberman. Henry is instantly smitten. He proposes not long after. Her father is not impressed. Edgar Fosberg looks at this young photographer with no money, no connections, no security, and sets 3 conditions. Earn at least $125 per month, save more than $1,000, and build a house for his daughter to live in. Henry Kaiser doesn't argue. He sells his photography business to relatives and employees. He boards a train heading west. He's 24 years old, leaving behind everything he knows, chasing a woman whose father thinks he's worthless. Spokane, Washington, is booming with railroad money and construction opportunity. It's 1906. The West is being built. And Henry Kaiser, the shoemaker's son who walked 8 miles a day for $1.50 a week, is about to prove that he can build things too. Bigger things than anyone expects. He just needs someone to give him a chance. Spokane, Washington, 1906. Henry Kaiser has been rejected by more employers than he can count. Hardware stores, construction firms, supply companies. Nobody wants a 24-year-old photographer from New York with no experience and no connections. Then McGowan Brothers Hardware says yes. It's a sales position, nothing glamorous. But Kaiser doesn't need glamorous. He needs a foothold. Within months, he's the company's top salesman. His personality is electric. He talks fast, thinks faster, and never stops moving. Customers like him. Bosses notice him. And every day, he's learning how the construction industry actually works, what builders need, what suppliers provide, where the money flows. On April 8, 1907, he marries Bess Fosberg. He's met her father's conditions, earned the salary, saved the money, built the foundation for a life together. Their first son, Edgar, arrives in 1908. A second son, Henry Jr., follows in 1917. But Kaiser isn't building a family just to stay comfortable. He's building an empire. In 1914, he founds the Henry J. Kaiser Company, specializing in road paving. It's a calculated bet. The automobile is transforming America, and automobiles need roads. Lots of them. Paved roads, good roads, roads that don't turn to mud every time it rains. Most paving contractors rely on manual labor, crews of men with shovels and wheelbarrows working slowly, expensively, inefficiently. Kaiser looks at this system and sees waste. He invests in heavy construction machinery, equipment that costs a fortune up front but moves dirt faster than any army of workers. His competitors think he's reckless. His accountant probably agrees. He finishes projects ahead of schedule, under budget. His reputation spreads. By the mid-1920s, Henry J. Kaiser Company is winning contracts across the Pacific Northwest. Roads, bridges, infrastructure, each project bigger than the last. Each deadline met or beaten. Kaiser develops a simple philosophy. Take on jobs others think are impossible, then figure out how to make them possible. In 1927, that philosophy pays off spectacularly. Kaiser wins an $18 million contract to build roads and bridges in Camagüey Province, Cuba. It's an enormous project. International scope, challenging terrain, tight deadlines. He completes it ahead of schedule. The contract transforms his regional company into a major national operation. Henry Kaiser is no longer a small-time paver from Spokane. He's a serious player. Then comes the opportunity that will define his pre-war career. In 1931, Kaiser joins a consortium called Six Companies Incorporated. The partners include some of the biggest names in Western construction: Bechtel, Morrison Knudsen, and others. Together, they bid on the largest construction project in American history, Hoover Dam on the Colorado River. They win. Building Hoover Dam is brutal. The Nevada desert reaches 120 degrees. Workers die from heat stroke, falls, and explosions. The Colorado River fights back constantly. But Six Companies finishes the dam ahead of schedule and under budget. It's an engineering marvel. 726 feet of concrete holding back an entire river. And Henry Kaiser is one of the men who built it. He doesn't stop there. Bonneville Dam on the Columbia River. Grand Coulee Dam, the largest concrete structure in North America. By the late 1930s, Kaiser has helped construct 3 of the most massive dams ever built. He's become one of the most successful industrialists in America. But something else happens on those remote dam sites. Something that will matter more than the concrete. Workers get injured. They get sick. They're miles from hospitals, days from proper care. Kaiser brings in a young surgeon named Sidney Garfield and makes him an offer. "We'll pay you 50 cents per worker per week, guaranteed. You keep them healthy." Garfield builds clinics. He focuses on prevention, not just treatment. Workers who stay healthy keep working. The system saves money and saves lives. It's revolutionary. Prepaid healthcare, preventive medicine, a model decades ahead of its time. Kaiser files the idea away. He'll need it again. By 1940, Henry Kaiser is 58 years old. He's built dams, paved roads across Cuba, pioneered healthcare for remote workers. He could retire wealthy and satisfied. Instead, he's watching newsreels from Europe. German U-boats are sinking British merchant ships faster than the Allies can replace them. Ships go down by the dozens. The Atlantic is a graveyard. Henry Kaiser has never built a ship in his life. He knows nothing about maritime engineering, nothing about naval architecture, nothing about the traditions of an industry that's operated the same way for centuries. He sees opportunity anyway. The Atlantic Ocean, 1940. German U-boats are hunting in wolf packs, and they're winning. British merchant ships go down by the hundreds. Cargo vessels, supply ships, oil tankers. Every week brings news of more tonnage lost, more crews drowned, more supplies rotting on the ocean floor. Britain is starving, and America can't build ships fast enough to save her. The numbers are catastrophic. Between 1941 and 1942, German submarines and surface raiders will sink 2,963 Allied ships. American shipyards will produce only 863 to replace them. Traditional shipbuilders are working at capacity, but traditional methods are agonizingly slow. The average Liberty ship takes 230 to 355 days to build. Some take longer. Every ship that slides down the ways represents nearly a year of labor, while U-boats sink 3 vessels a week. President Roosevelt calls for America to become the arsenal of democracy. The U.S. Maritime Commission scrambles to expand production. They need new shipyards, new workers, new methods. But the established East Coast shipbuilders insist they have everything under control. They actively discourage Washington from contracting with outsiders. This is their industry. They know how to build ships. Newcomers aren't welcome. Henry Kaiser isn't asking for permission. He's never built a ship. He knows nothing about naval architecture, nothing about maritime engineering, nothing about the century-old traditions of the shipbuilding industry. What he knows is construction, logistics, mass production. And he knows that the traditional shipbuilders are wrong. In 1940, Kaiser partners with Todd Shipyards to secure a contract for 60 cargo ships for the British government. He establishes his first shipyard in Richmond, California, on empty tidal flats along San Francisco Bay. Construction begins in December 1940. The skeptics are already laughing. But Kaiser isn't building a traditional shipyard. He's building a factory. He sends engineers to study Ford's Willow Run plant, where automobiles roll off assembly lines with unprecedented efficiency. The insight is simple but revolutionary. Stop treating ships like cathedrals and start treating them like cars. Traditional shipbuilding works from the keel up. Skilled craftsmen spend months riveting steel plates together, one at a time, in sequence. It's how ships have been built for generations. Kaiser throws out the playbook. His approach, prefabrication. Build the ship in 250-ton sections at facilities scattered across the country. Transport those sections by rail to the shipyard. Assemble them with cranes instead of scaffolding. And here's the key. Weld the sections together instead of riveting them. Welding is faster than riveting. It's lighter, eliminating up to 300 tons of dead weight per ship. And critically, it's easier to teach. Riveting requires years of experience. A competent welder can be trained in weeks. Kaiser doesn't have years. He doesn't even have months. He has a war breathing down his neck and a workforce that's never seen the inside of a shipyard. In April 1941, the Maritime Commission requests a second Kaiser yard for Liberty ship construction. The keel for his first vessel is laid that same month. In May, Kaiser's Oregon shipbuilding yard launches the Star of Oregon, the first Liberty ship from his Pacific Northwest operation. The initial build time is 131 days, still faster than the industry average, but not fast enough. Then Pearl Harbor changes everything. December 7th, 1941. America enters the war. The Maritime Commission's polite requests become desperate demands. Ships, any ships, as many as possible, as fast as possible. Kaiser's unorthodox methods suddenly aren't experimental. They're essential. The contracts explode. A second Richmond yard, a third, a fourth, 3 more yards in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon shipbuilding on the Willamette River, Swan Island in Portland, and a massive facility in Vancouver, Washington. 7 shipyards that didn't exist 2 years earlier, all building ships using methods the industry establishment called insane. The traditionalists still have objections. They say welded hulls will crack in cold water. They say unskilled workers can't build seaworthy vessels. They say Kaiser is a dam builder playing at shipbuilding, and his ships will break apart in the North Atlantic. They're about to be proven spectacularly wrong. Within months, Kaiser's yards will be producing ships faster than any operation in human history. And the workers making it happen will be people the traditional industry would never have touched. Richmond, California. 1942. The population explodes from 23,000 to 130,000 in a matter of months. Workers flood in from every corner of America. Oklahoma farms, Mississippi sharecropping towns, Michigan factory floors. They arrive by train, by bus, by thumb. They sleep in all-night movie theaters and share hotbeds where one worker climbs in as another climbs out. They come because Kaiser is hiring, and Kaiser is hiring everyone. Traditional shipyards employ skilled white men with years of training. That's how it's always been done. But Kaiser doesn't have years. He has contracts for hundreds of ships and a workforce that's never touched a welding torch. So he throws out the old rules and writes new ones. Executive Order 8802, signed by Roosevelt in 1941, prohibits discrimination in defense industries. Most companies treat it as a suggestion. Kaiser treats it as an invitation. He actively recruits women and African Americans. He hires wounded veterans, people with disabilities, former waitresses and domestic workers. He takes anyone willing to learn. The numbers are staggering. By mid-1944, women comprise over 27% of all laborers at the Richmond shipyards. They're 41% of welders, 33% of burners. At the Kaiser yards, they're called Wendy the welder, not Rosie the riveter, who works in aircraft factories. These women are building ships. Eastine Cowner arrives in Richmond as a former waitress. She becomes a scaler on Liberty ships, chipping rust and preparing metal surfaces for welding. Nearly 1,000 African American women work alongside her in the Richmond yards alone. On May 7, 1943, the SS George Washington Carver slides into the water, a Liberty ship built largely by black workers, named for a black hero. It's a statement. Whether America is ready to hear it is another question. The secret to Kaiser's workforce revolution is prefabrication. Traditional shipbuilding requires craftsmen who understand the entire vessel. Kaiser's assembly line approach breaks the work into specialized tasks. Each worker learns one function: welding a specific joint, fitting a particular component, burning through steel at a precise angle. You don't need years of experience. You need weeks of training and the willingness to repeat the same motion 1,000 times. But the work is brutal. Shipyards are deafening. The noise is constant. Hammering, welding, grinding, cranes groaning under impossible loads. Workers risk falls from great heights, crushing injuries from shifting steel, respiratory damage from welding fumes. The flash from welding arcs causes so much eye damage that it earns a name: shipyard eye. Over 700 workers die in American shipyards in 1943 alone. And the discrimination doesn't disappear just because Kaiser is hiring. The Boilermakers Union, the largest shipyard union on the West Coast, refuses to admit black workers as full members. Instead, they create a segregated auxiliary called a 36. Black workers pay the same dues but receive fewer benefits and no voice in union decisions. They fight discrimination while building the ships that fight fascism. They call it the Double V campaign: victory abroad, victory at home. Kaiser tries to soften the edges of this brutal work. He builds childcare centers at shipyard entrances, operating during all 3 shifts: professional child development staff, nutritious meals. Working mothers can drop off their children on the way in and pick them up on the way out. It's revolutionary, the largest childcare program in the nation. He extends Dr. Garfield's healthcare model from the dams to the shipyards. Workers contribute 50 cents per week. Their families are covered. Clinics open at the yards. An emergency hospital rises in Richmond. More than 200,000 people, workers and families, are enrolled in the Permanente Health Plan. Healthcare tied to employment, prevention emphasized over treatment. It's decades ahead of its time. By April 1943, The 4 Richmond shipyards employ over 79,000 workers, represented by 27 different unions. The 3 Northwest yards employ another 97,000 at peak. Kaiser has assembled the largest industrial workforce in American history. Former sharecroppers working beside former waitresses, black women welding next to white men from Oklahoma. A workforce that would have been unthinkable 2 years earlier, building ships at a pace that would have been unthinkable 2 decades earlier. A reporter asks Henry Kaiser if his yards could build a ship faster than the current record of 10 days. Kaiser replies that he could do it in 8. Then he decides to do it in 4. November 8, 1942, 12:01 a.m., Richmond Shipyard No. 2. A whistle blows. The keel plate for hull number 440 drops into position. A stopwatch starts. What happens over the next 4 days will become legend. The challenge begins 2 months earlier in Portland. Kaiser's Oregon shipbuilding yard completes the SS Joseph N. Teal in just 10 days, keel to launch. It's a staggering achievement. President Roosevelt himself attends the christening, though wartime security keeps his presence secret. The newspapers trumpet the accomplishment. 10 days for a 10,500-ton cargo ship. The traditional industry is stunned. A reporter asks Henry Kaiser if it could have been done faster. Kaiser, never one to understate, replies that his crews could have finished in 8 days, but delayed the launch so Roosevelt could attend. The reporter presses, "Could you do it in half the time?" Kaiser says yes, and now he has to prove it. The ship will be named after Robert E. Peary, the Arctic explorer who reached the North Pole. The irony is fitting. Peary's expedition pushed human endurance to its limits. So will this. The preparation is meticulous. This isn't normal production, it's a coordinated performance. Kaiser's engineers pre-position 250,000 prefabricated parts totaling 14 million pounds. Sections arrive by railroad flat car from suppliers across the country. Cranes are staged. Welding crews are rehearsed. Every movement is choreographed like a military assault. The keel drops at midnight on Sunday, November 8th. The clock starts running. Welding torches ignite across the shipway. Giant cranes swing sections into place. Bow, stern, midships, deck houses. Workers swarm over the growing hull around the clock. 3 shifts, no breaks in production. The noise is constant. The pace is relentless. By Monday morning, the basic hull is taking shape. By Tuesday, the superstructure is rising. Pipes, wiring, machinery. Components that normally take weeks to install are fitted in hours. Every minute counts. Every delay ripples through the entire operation. The workers know what's at stake. This isn't just about speed records. German U-boats are sinking Allied ships faster than America can replace them. Every Liberty ship that reaches the Atlantic carries 2,840 jeeps, or 440 tanks, or 230 million rounds of ammunition. Every day a ship spends under construction is a day it isn't carrying cargo. The math is brutal and simple. Build faster or lose the war. Thursday, November 12th, 4 days and 15 hours after the keel was laid. The SS Robert E. Peary slides down the ways into San Francisco Bay. 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. A 10,500-ton cargo ship built from scratch. The previous record was 10 days. Kaiser has shattered it by more than half. Journalists and military officials watch in disbelief. Newsreel cameras capture the launch for audiences across America. The propaganda value is immeasurable. German submariners are sinking ships as fast as they can load torpedoes. And Henry Kaiser just proved that American workers can build ships faster than anyone thought possible. Critics immediately label it a stunt ship. They're not entirely wrong. The Robert E. Peary required extraordinary coordination that can't be sustained for routine production. Normal operations at the Richmond yards average around 50 days per ship. The 4-day record was a demonstration, not a production template. But Kaiser calls it an incentive ship. And he's right about that too. The record electrifies his workforce. Morale surges. Workers who spent months grinding through the same repetitive tasks see proof that their labor matters. They're not just building ships. They're building ships faster than anyone in history. They're winning a war, and the pace keeps accelerating. At the start of the Liberty Ship program, construction averaged 355 days and 1.4 million man-hours per vessel. By the end of 1943, those numbers have plummeted to 41 days and 500,000 man-hours. The most efficient Kaiser yards approach 300,000 man-hours. Ships that once took nearly a year now take 6 weeks, then a month, then routinely just over 2 weeks. The Richmond yards alone built 747 ships during the war, more than any other shipyard in history. At peak production, they're launching 3 vessels in a single day. By war's end, the 4 Richmond facilities have produced $1.8 billion worth of ships. Across all 7 Kaiser yards, workers assemble 1,490 vessels, 27% of everything the U.S. Maritime Commission orders. The SS Robert E. Peary, the ship built in 4 days, goes to war. First voyage, San Francisco to New Caledonia, carrying food and ammunition. Then to Guadalcanal, delivering supplies under Japanese fire. Then the Atlantic. On June 7, 1944, the Peary arrives at Omaha Beach, delivering men and equipment to the Normandy invasion under constant attack. She makes crossing after crossing, shuttling cargo between England and France until September. The stunt ship serves throughout the entire war. She's finally scrapped in 1963, 21 years after workers built her in less than 5 days. But the workers who built her aren't just building ships. They're living in emergency housing thrown together almost as fast as the vessels. Entire cities rising from mud and floodplains. Communities that didn't exist 2 years ago, holding tens of thousands of people who came from everywhere to build ships for a war they hope will end soon. One of those cities sits on the Columbia River floodplain, 15 feet below water level, protected by nothing but railroad embankments. They call it Vanport, and it's about to become Oregon's second largest city. Portland, Oregon. 1942. Henry Kaiser has a problem. Workers are flooding into the Pacific Northwest by the thousands, over 72,000 new arrivals during the war. They need somewhere to live, and Portland doesn't want to help. The city has no public housing authority when the war begins. The private housing market is completely inadequate. Real estate agents follow an industry code of ethics that explicitly restricts where African Americans can buy or rent. Most neighborhoods are off limits, and the real estate industry actively opposes building public housing that might compete with private landlords. Kaiser's shipyards need workers. Workers need homes. Portland shrugs. So Edgar Kaiser, Henry's son and the general manager of the Northwest operations, finds his own solution. He identifies 650 acres of Columbia River floodplain just outside Portland's city limits
and its authority. The land is cheap because nobody wants it. It floods. It sits 15 feet below the water level of the Columbia River at high water. Railroad embankments serve as the only barrier between the site and the river. Edgar doesn't care. He makes a deal with the U.S. Maritime Commission in August 1942. Federal funds will finance construction.
The buildings will be temporary, designed for demolition after the war. Cheap materials, wooden blocks for foundations, fiberboard walls, no permanence, no pretense of permanence. Construction begins immediately. Within months, 9,942 housing units rise from the floodplain. Schools, nurseries, a hospital, 2 shopping centers, a movie theater, community centers, recreation facilities, everything a city needs, built at wartime speed with wartime materials. They name it Vanport, Vancouver plus Portland. It's the largest wartime housing project in the United States. At its peak in 1944, over 40,000 people call Vanport home. That makes it Oregon's second largest city, trailing only Portland itself. A city that didn't exist 2 years earlier now holds more residents than Salem, Eugene, or any other Oregon community. The newspapers call it the Miracle City. Urban planners call it a masterpiece of planning. Critics call it something else entirely. The demographics are unlike anything Oregon has seen. Workers arrive from across America, white families from Oklahoma and Texas, black families from Louisiana and Mississippi, migrants from cities and farms and everywhere in between. Before the war, Portland's entire black population numbered roughly 1,800. By 1944, Vanport alone houses over 10,000 African Americans, more than 3 times the pre-war total for all of Portland. Kaiser doesn't segregate his hiring. He can't afford to. The yards need every worker they can train. But Vanport reflects the contradictions of wartime America. The schools are integrated. The childcare centers are integrated. The recreation facilities are integrated. But housing assignments are segregated. Medical facilities are segregated. Black families live in designated sections, separated from white neighbors by invisible lines everyone understands. The community is restless by design. Workers are transient. Families move in and move out. At some points, 100 families leave Vanport every single day, replaced by 100 more arriving. There's no newspaper, no high school, no civic institutions that might bind people together. The temporary nature of everything breeds anxiety. Nobody's building roots in soil that might wash away. And yet, Vanport hires Oregon's first black teachers, Oregon's first black police officers. The integrated schools teach children who've never shared a classroom with someone of a different race. Working mothers drop their children at Kaiser's Shipyard childcare centers, the largest such program in the nation, and pick them up after their shifts. For all its flaws, Vanport is a genuine multiracial community in a state that was founded with black exclusion laws. The women who weld ships during the day come home to fiberboard apartments that shake when the wind blows. Former domestic workers, who now earn more than they ever imagined, share cramped quarters with families from states they've never visited. It's chaotic, uncomfortable, impermanent. It's also something new, something that challenges assumptions about who can live next to whom, who can work beside whom, who belongs. By 1945, the shipyards begin shutting down. Workers start leaving. The contracts dry up. The war ends. But not everyone goes home. Thousands of residents, especially black families who face discrimination everywhere else, stay in Vanport. Where else can they go? Portland won't have them. Oregon doesn't want them. By 1948, the population has dropped to 18,500. 1/3 are African American. Many are unemployed. The city that was built for shipyard workers now houses people with nowhere else to live, in buildings that were never meant to last, on land that everyone knows is dangerous. Spring comes early that year. Heavy rains fall in late May. The mountain snowpack begins melting faster than usual. The Columbia River rises. On the morning of Memorial Day, May 30th, 1948, the Housing Authority of Portland issues a statement to Vanport residents. Dikes are safe at present. You will be warned if necessary. You will have time to leave. Don't get excited. The dikes hold until 4:05 p.m. August 15th, 1945. The radio crackles with news that changes everything. Japan has surrendered. The war is over. Church bells ring across America. Strangers embrace in the streets. Sailors kiss nurses in Times Square. And in the Kaiser Shipyards, the pink slips start appearing in workers' lockers. There's no celebration on the shipways. The workers know what peace means for them. War built this empire. Peace will destroy it. Within days of the Japanese surrender, the Maritime Commission begins cancelling contracts. Ships under construction will be finished. New keels will not be laid. The assembly lines that produced 3 vessels a day will produce nothing. The shutdown happens faster than anyone expects. At peak production, Kaiser's 7 shipyards employed over 200,000 workers across California, Oregon, and Washington. By the end of 1945, the 3 Northwest yards retain only 12,000, 10,000 men and 2,000 women. The Richmond yards experience similar devastation. Month by month, the workforce evaporates. The cranes stop moving. The welding torches go dark. The shipways that launched 1,490 vessels fall silent. 200,000 jobs, gone in weeks. The women go first. They always do. The message is explicit. You are temporary substitutes for men during a labor shortage. The men are coming home. Go back to your kitchens. The Oregon Shipyard Corporation lays off its last 3 women welders in October 1945. Across the country, the pattern repeats. Women who built ships, welded aircraft, assembled munitions, all told their services are no longer required. African American workers face the same calculus, compounded by racism. The jobs they held during the war were supposed to be temporary. Defense industry work was an exception, not a new normal. As white veterans return expecting their old positions, black workers find themselves pushed out of industries they helped save. The exodus begins. Many workers pack up and return to the states they came from: Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, Texas. They arrived in Portland and Richmond chasing wartime wages, and now those wages are gone. There's nothing keeping them on the West Coast. They take their skills, their savings, and their families back to wherever they started. But thousands stay. They've built lives here. They have children in school, friends in the community, memories attached to these places. Some have nowhere else to go. The discrimination that pushed them west hasn't disappeared back home. The opportunities that drew them here may be gone, but the obstacles they fled remain. Henry Kaiser watches his empire disintegrate and searches for alternatives. He tries to convert the shipyards to other manufacturing. It fails. The equipment is specialized for shipbuilding. Massive cranes designed to lift hull sections, welding stations configured for marine construction, assembly lines that only make sense for vessels. You can't retool a shipyard to make refrigerators. The infrastructure doesn't translate. The locations don't help either. Shipyards need waterfront access. Waterfront property isn't ideal for most manufacturing. The land that made sense for launching ships makes no sense for producing consumer goods. Kaiser explores option after option. Nothing works. One by one, the yards are sold off or demolished. The Vancouver shipyard, the facility that launched 50 escort carriers, 30 landing ships, and dozens of other vessels, sells to Gilmore Steel for $3,250,000, a fraction of what it cost to build. The equipment is stripped. The buildings are repurposed or torn down. Nearly 200 acres of industrial infrastructure, constructed at wartime speed with federal dollars, dismantled almost as quickly. In Rhode Island, the Walsh Kaiser Yard that produced 63 ships closes and sells to the city of Providence for approximately $308,000. The site eventually becomes a drive-in theater. In Richmond, the 4 shipyards that built more vessels than any other location in history begin their long transformation into something unrecognizable. But something survives. On July 21st, 1945, the same month the shipyards begin shutting down, Kaiser and Dr. Sidney Garfield open the Permanente Health Plan to the public. The healthcare system they built for dam workers and shipyard employees doesn't have to die with the contracts. Workers who once paid 50 cents a week for coverage can continue their enrollment. The clinics stay open. The hospitals keep operating. Kaiser Permanente will grow into one of the largest healthcare organizations in America, serving millions of members and generating tens of billions in revenue. The system outlasts everything else. The shipyards become rubble and memory. The worker housing deteriorates and empties. But the healthcare model, prepaid coverage, preventive care, group practice, endures. The workers scatter. The institutions survive. It's a pattern that repeats throughout industrial history. By 1946, the shipyards are ghosts. The cranes that lifted 250-ton sections stand frozen against grey skies. The assembly lines that hummed around the clock are silent. The cafeterias that fed 3 shifts of workers serve no one. In Portland, the Oregon shipbuilding site begins its transformation into a scrap metal facility. In Richmond, the yards start their long decline toward abandonment. And in Vanport, 18,500 people remain. They're living in temporary housing that was never meant to last this long. Fiberboard walls, wooden block foundations, buildings designed for demolition after a war that ended 2 years ago. 1/3 of the residents are African American, families who can't find housing anywhere else in Portland because of discriminatory real estate practices. The spring of 1948 brings heavy rains. The Columbia River begins to rise, and the railroad embankments that serve as Vanport's only protection against flooding start to feel less like walls and more like prayers. May 30th, 1948. Memorial Day weekend. The Columbia River is running 15 feet above the floodplain where Vanport sits. 2 major rainstorms have swept through the region, May 19th to 23rd. Then again, May 26th to 29th. Above normal temperatures have accelerated the mountain snowmelt. Water levels haven't been this high since the record flood of 1894. Vanport residents wake to an official announcement from the Housing Authority of Portland. The message is reassuring. Dikes are safe at present. You will be warned if necessary. You will have time to leave. Don't get excited. Many residents have already taken precautions. They've moved belongings to upper floors and attics. They've watched the river rise before. Nothing happened. The dikes held. The railroad embankments that separate their homes from the Columbia have stood for years. Why would today be different? It's a holiday. Many residents are away, visiting family, attending Memorial Day events, enjoying the long weekend. Those who remain go about their Sunday routines. Children play. Families prepare meals. The radio plays music. At 4:05 p.m., a 200-foot section of railroad embankment collapses. There's no warning, no siren, no gradual seepage that might signal trouble. One moment, the dike stands. The next moment, it's gone. And the Columbia River, 15 feet higher than the lowest point in Vanport, explodes through the gap. The floodwaters move faster than anyone can run. Water races through the streets at speeds approaching 20 miles per hour. Houses lift off their wooden block foundations and begin to float. Buildings crash into each other, splintering on impact. The fiberboard walls that were never meant to last crumble like wet cardboard. Resident Stephen Epler watches in horror as homes float past at terrifying speed, smashing into everything in their path. Houses floating around at 20 miles an hour, he later recalls. The destruction is total. The speed is incomprehensible. Sloughs within Vanport absorb some of the initial surge, buying precious minutes. Residents have perhaps 40 minutes to flee to higher ground along Denver Avenue. Many make it. Some don't. The entire city is underwater in less than 90 minutes. Everything vanishes. The 9,942 housing units, the 2 shopping centers, the movie theater, the hospital, the schools, the nurseries, the community centers. 6 years of life in Oregon's second largest city, erased in the time it takes to watch a movie. The official death toll is 15 to 18 people, miraculously low given the violence of the flood. The holiday weekend saved lives. Thousands of residents were simply elsewhere when the dike failed. The Slavs bought time. The higher ground along Denver Avenue provided escape. But the numbers don't capture the devastation. 18,000 people are homeless by nightfall. 1/3 of them are African American. Families who came to Portland during the war stayed because they had nowhere else to go, and now have lost everything they owned. Possessions, documentation, photographs, savings hidden in mattresses, the material accumulation of lifetimes scattered downstream. The response is chaotic. Private citizens take flood victims into their homes. The Red Cross mobilizes. Vanport College, the extension center that Kaiser established in 1946 to attract veterans, assists with recovery efforts. 12 days later, on June 11th, President Harry Truman flies to Portland to survey the damage. He sees a wasteland where a city once stood. The bitterness is immediate and lasting. Flood victims accuse the housing authority of negligence. Some go further, alleging deliberate sabotage. They point to the morning's reassurance. Dikes are safe at present, and ask how authorities could have been so wrong. They note that Vanport's population was disproportionately poor and black. They wonder if different residents would have received better warnings. Conspiracy theories spread. Some believe the Housing Authority, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Portland Chamber of Commerce conspired to let the dikes fail. The motivations cited are racism and contempt for the poor. Decades later, historians will draw parallels to Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. Another disaster where officials assured residents they were safe. Another flood that devastated a community with large numbers of black residents. Another catastrophe where the government response was criticized as inadequate. The courts provide no satisfaction. Flood victims sue, but judges rule that the federal government cannot be held responsible for a natural disaster. The dikes failed because of unprecedented water levels, not negligence. The fact that Vanport was built on a floodplain in the first place, that thousands of people were housed 15 feet below a river prone to flooding, is treated as irrelevant. What Vanport represented dies with the city. Oregon's first black teachers and police officers had worked there. Integrated schools had educated children who'd never learned alongside students of different races. A genuine, if deeply flawed, multiracial community had existed for 6 years in a state founded with black exclusion laws. The flood doesn't just destroy buildings. It scatters a community that challenged assumptions about who belongs in Oregon. The survivors disperse into a Portland that still doesn't want them. Some black families eventually settle in the Albina district of northeast Portland, creating a new community from the wreckage of the old one. Some white families return to the states they came from. Some simply disappear from the historical record. The site of Vanport becomes Delta Park. It becomes the Portland International Raceway. It becomes grass and concrete where 40,000 people once lived, worked, raised children, and built ships that won a war. There's no museum at the actual flood site, no monument to the 18,000 people who lost everything. Just a historical marker and the quiet waters of the Columbia River, flowing past as if nothing ever happened. By 1948, nearly every physical trace of Henry Kaiser's Pacific Northwest empire has been erased. The shipyards are closed or demolished. The worker housing is destroyed. The communities are scattered. 3 years after victory, the infrastructure that helped win World War II has vanished. And Henry Kaiser, he's already moved on. The shipyards were never meant to last forever. Neither was Vanport. Kaiser builds things. When one project ends, he starts another. Even before the war ended, he was planning his next empire. America is going to need cars. Lots of them. And Henry Kaiser knows how to build things at scale. He's going to build automobiles. It's the worst decision he'll ever make. July 1945. The war isn't even over yet, and Henry Kaiser is already planning his next conquest. American soldiers will come home by the millions. They'll marry. They'll start families. They'll need cars. The big three automakers, Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, are still producing warmed-over pre-war designs. There's an opening for someone bold enough to seize it. Kaiser has built dams, roads, and more ships than anyone in history. How hard can cars be? He partners with Joseph Fraser, a veteran automobile executive who has worked at Packard, General Motors, Chrysler, and Willys Overland. Fraser brings industry experience. Kaiser brings capital, ambition, and a reputation for achieving the impossible. Together they form the Kaiser-Fraser Corporation in July 1945. The location is symbolic. They lease the Willow Run plant in Michigan, the same facility where Ford built B-24 Liberator bombers during the war. The factory that helped defeat Hitler will now build cars for the peace that follows. The early signs are promising. Kaiser and Fraser sedans debut in 1946 and 1947 as the first truly new post-war designs on the American market. While the big three are still selling pre-war models with minor updates, Kaiser Fraser offers something fresh. The styling is distinctive. The build quality is solid. Pent-up consumer demand drives strong initial sales. Henry Kaiser seems to have done it again. Then the problems emerge. They're fundamental and unfixable. Kaiser Frazer doesn't have its own engine. The company relies on a flathead six-cylinder from Continental, a design that dates back to the 1920s. It's adequate for 1946. By 1948, it's embarrassing. Oldsmobile and Cadillac introduce modern overhead valve V8 engines. Chrysler and Studebaker follow. Suddenly, the market is flooded with powerful, efficient, exciting power plants. And Kaiser Frazer is still selling technology from the previous generation. There's no easy fix. Developing a proprietary V8 requires years of engineering and millions in investment. Kaiser Frazer tries. Engineers work on a 288 cubic inch V8 through 1949. But the project goes nowhere. The company lacks the resources to compete on multiple fronts simultaneously. The dealer network is another weakness. Frazer recruits former Graham Page dealers, but the coverage is thin compared to the Big Three's nationwide presence. When a Ford or Chevrolet breaks down in rural America, there's a dealership nearby. When a Kaiser breaks down, the owner might drive 100 miles for service. Then 1949 arrives, and the crisis becomes catastrophic. The Big Three launch completely redesigned models: Ford, Chevrolet, Plymouth, Buick, Oldsmobile. Every major manufacturer floods the market with fresh designs, while Kaiser Frazer is still selling cars that debuted 3 years earlier. The styling that seemed innovative in 1946 now looks dated. Joseph Frazer sees the problem clearly. He wants to cut production, reduce inventory, and wait until restyled Kaiser cars are ready. It's the conservative play, the prudent play, the play that might save the company. Henry Kaiser refuses. The Kaisers never retrench, he declares. He tools up for 200,000 cars anyway. He believes that sheer volume and willpower can overcome any obstacle. It's the same philosophy that built ships in 4 days. It works when you have guaranteed government contracts and unlimited federal funding. The automobile market is different. Kaiser Frazer sells 58,000 cars in 1949. The company loses millions. Joseph Frazer, proven right and ignored anyway, resigns as president. He stays on as a consultant, but his active involvement ends. Edgar Kaiser, Henry's son, takes over operations. The company lurches from crisis to crisis. In 1950, Kaiser Frazer launches the Henry J, a compact car named after the founder. The concept is sound, an affordable, fuel-efficient vehicle for budget-conscious buyers. The execution is disastrous. The car feels cheap because it is cheap. The standard upholstery is essentially plastic-coated paper. There's no trunk lid. You access the storage space by folding down the rear seat. The public finds it too small and too stark for its $1,300 price tag. First-year sales of 81,000 seem promising. Then reality sets in. Sales plummet to 23,000 the second year, then 17,500. The Henry J becomes a symbol of everything wrong with Kaiser's automobile venture. Good intentions undermined by inadequate resources and poor judgment. In 1954, the company tries one last time. The Kaiser Darrin is a gorgeous sports car designed by Howard Dutch Darrin, with doors that slide into the front fenders. It looks like nothing else on the road. But the 90-horsepower Willys six-cylinder is woefully underpowered for a sports car. Only 435 are built before production ends.
There's one bright spot in the wreckage. In 1953, Kaiser buys the ailing Willys Overland Company, mainly for its Jeep brand. Jeep is struggling, but it has something Kaiser's passenger cars never achieved: a clear identity and a loyal customer base. Kaiser saves Jeep from bankruptcy. The brand survives, eventually becoming one of the most recognized nameplates in automotive history. In 1955, Edgar Kaiser announces that U.S. production of Kaiser and Willys passenger cars will cease. The dream is over. Kaiser Frazer, the company that was supposed to challenge the Big Three, has lasted exactly 10 years. The automobile industry crushes independent manufacturers throughout the 1950s. Hudson, Nash, Packard, Studebaker. One by one, they fall or merge into obscurity. Kaiser Frazer is neither the first nor the last, but it's perhaps the most instructive failure. Henry Kaiser could build anything the government ordered. He could not build something consumers wanted to buy in a competitive market. What survives tells the real story. Kaiser Permanente, the healthcare system born on dam construction sites and shipyard floors, keeps growing after the yards close. By 2018, it generates $79.7 billion in annual revenue and serves millions of members. The Kaiser Family Foundation, established in 1948, becomes one of the largest philanthropic organizations focused on health research. Kaiser Industries consolidates the cement, aluminum, and steel businesses into a publicly traded conglomerate. Henry Kaiser moves his family to Hawaii in 1955. He's 73 years old, but retirement isn't in his vocabulary. He keeps working 12-hour days. He develops Hawaiian real estate. He manages his business empire across multiple industries and multiple continents. On August 24, 1967, Henry John Kaiser dies in Honolulu. He's 85 years old and still working. The shoemaker's son, who walked 4 miles to earn $1.50 a week, has become one of the most successful industrialists in American history. But the shipyards, the achievement that defined his greatest triumph, exist only in memory. The Richmond yards are unrecognizable. The Portland yards are scrap metal. Vanport is a park and a racetrack, and for decades hardly anyone remembers what happened in those places, or who built them, or why it mattered. Until 2000, when the National Park Service does something unexpected. Richmond, California. Today. If you drive along the waterfront where the Richmond Inner Harbor meets San Francisco Bay, you'll find something unexpected. A national park dedicated to people who haven't worked there in 80 years. The Rosie the Riveter World War II. Homefront National Historical Park sits on land that once held Kaiser Shipyard No. 3. The cranes are gone. The assembly lines are gone. The 100,000 workers who once swarmed these docks are scattered across the country or buried in cemeteries from California to Arkansas. What remains is a memorial. A walkway shaped like a ship's keel slopes toward the water, aligning with the Golden Gate Bridge on the horizon. Porcelain enamel panels display photographs of women welding, burning, scaling, doing work that society told them they couldn't do, shouldn't do, wouldn't do for long. The memorial was dedicated in 2000, 55 years after the last ship slid down the ways. It took that long for America to remember. Stand on that walkway today, and you're standing where 3 ships launched in a single day, where 747 vessels were built faster and cheaper than anyone thought possible, where former waitresses and domestic workers
became welders earning more than their husbands, where African American women fought discrimination while building Liberty ships named after black heroes like George Washington Carver. The silent shipyards speak, and if you listen, they're screaming 3 lessons that echo across 8 decades. Lesson 1. Purpose-built empires die with their purpose. Kaiser's shipyards were designed for exactly one function: building ships for a war. Every crane, every assembly line, every training program, every housing unit existed to serve that single mission. When the mission ended, so did the empire. There was no pivot. There was no transition. The infrastructure couldn't adapt because it was never meant to. Kaiser tried to convert the yards to other manufacturing. He failed. The equipment was too specialized. The locations were wrong. The workforce had skills that didn't transfer. Within months of VJ Day, nearly 200,000 workers were gone. Not laid off gradually, not retrained, gone. The machine that built ships faster than U-boats could sink them couldn't build anything else at all. Modern companies worship flexibility, agility, the ability to pivot. Kaiser's shipyards are a monument to the opposite. Single-purpose efficiency so extreme that when the purpose disappeared, nothing remained. The yards weren't killed by competition or mismanagement. They were killed by success. They won the war and made themselves obsolete in the same moment. Lesson 2. Workers are expendable. Systems endure. 200,000 people built the ships that won World War II. They came from farms in Oklahoma, factories in Michigan, kitchens in Mississippi. They learned to weld in weeks. They worked 3 shifts around the clock. They lived in emergency housing on floodplains. And when the war ended, they were discarded. Women were sent home first. Temporary substitutes for men. African Americans faced renewed discrimination. Vanport's black residents couldn't find housing in Portland because realtors followed codes that explicitly excluded them. When the Columbia River flooded in 1948, it was the workers, the people who built the ships, whose homes were destroyed, whose possessions were scattered downstream, whose community vanished in 90 minutes. But Kaiser's healthcare systems survived. The prepaid model he created for shipyard workers became Kaiser Permanente, opened to the public on July 21, 1945. The same month, the yards started shutting down. Today, Kaiser Permanente generates nearly $80 billion in annual revenue and serves millions of members. The system outlasted the workers who built it. The institution survived while the humans were scattered. This is the uncomfortable truth about industrial empires. They care about labor, not laborers. Kaiser genuinely tried to treat his workers well. Childcare, healthcare, housing. But the moment the contracts ended, so did the relationship. The workers were necessary for the mission. When the mission ended, the workers became costs to eliminate. Lesson 3. Government giveth, government taketh away. Every ship Kaiser built was funded by the U.S. Maritime Commission. Every yard was built with federal contracts. Every worker's paycheck ultimately came from taxpayer dollars. Kaiser didn't create demand for ships. World War II did. He fulfilled government orders with unprecedented efficiency, but the orders came from Washington, not from the market. When Washington stopped ordering ships, there were no ships to build. No amount of innovation or efficiency could change that basic fact. Kaiser had built the greatest shipbuilding operation in history, but he didn't control whether there would be ships to build. He was a contractor, not a company. The moment the government decided the war was over, Kaiser's empire was over too. This is the essential fragility of government-dependent industry. Defense contractors, infrastructure builders, healthcare providers who rely on Medicare, they all face the same risk Kaiser faced in 1945. The same entity that made you rich can make you bankrupt with a single policy change. What happened after the fall? Kaiser moved on, as he always did. Kaiser Frazer automobiles failed by 1955, but he saved the Jeep brand by buying Willys Overland. Kaiser Aluminum and Kaiser Steel became major industrial forces. The Kaiser Family Foundation funds health research to this day. Henry himself moved to Hawaii in 1955 and kept working 12-hour days until he died in 1967 at age 85. The shipyards became memories. In Richmond, the Rosie the Riveter Memorial draws visitors who learn about women workers for the first time. The SS Red Oak Victory, the last ship launched at Richmond during the war, is now a museum ship docked nearby. In Portland, the Oregon shipbuilding site is now a scrap metal facility. The Swan Island Shipyard is an industrial park. Vancouver's Kaiser Yard has a memorial observation tower where visitors can see remnants of the bays that once launched escort carriers. And Vanport is Delta Park. It's the Portland International Raceway. It's grass and concrete where 40,000 people once lived, worked, raised children, and fought for a country that didn't fully accept them. There's no museum at the actual flood site, no monument to the 18,000 people who lost everything in 90 minutes, just a historical marker and the quiet waters of the Columbia River. The silent shipyards speak. Stand where Kaiser Shipyard No. 3 once stood. Look at the photographs of women welding, of black workers building Liberty ships, of cranes lifting sections into place. Imagine 100,000 people working 3 shifts, building 3 ships a day, producing $1.8 billion worth of vessels that helped win a world war. Then look around. It's gone, all of it, demolished, flooded, forgotten for half a century. This is what happens when industry is built for war instead of peace. When workers are treated as temporary, when empires are designed to disappear. The ships sailed, the workers scattered, the yards fell silent. Henry Kaiser built something magnificent and something tragically temporary. His greatest legacy isn't the 1,490 ships, though they helped win the war. It's not the automobile company that failed, or the aluminum business that succeeded. His greatest legacy is the healthcare system that serves millions today, born from a simple insight. Workers who are healthy work better. But the shipyards are gone, and the silence they've left behind is deafening. Welcome to the silent Kaiser Shipyards, where America's war machine was built, triumphant, and abandoned. Subscribe now. Because understanding how empires vanish is the first step to building something that lasts.